Folks, welcome to episode 9 of the Most Important Skill in Life podcast. I am your host, Travis Daigle. Today, we're going to be getting into an article I wrote back on July 19th, 2024, entitled Crossing the Gap. And in this article, what I was talking about or writing about briefly was when we are confronted with a set of circumstances where we want to make a meaningful change or move in a certain direction in our life, and there is no one in our environment that has set that example for us, and maybe even actively people are resisting us in that environment. And what got me thinking about this for this particular article was there was a day at work. I work as a security guard, and there was a day at work where I passed through a some offices with what do we call those, cubicles? There were cubicles. There was a bunch of cubicles in the office, and every time I come into an environment like that, I think about the time that I spent in corporate America working as an engineer after college. This was back in 2005, 2006 timeframe, and whenever I find myself thinking about that time now, as like I said, back in 2005, now it's the time I'm recording this is January 2025. So we're talking about almost 20 years, over 20 years ago now, or no, almost 20 years ago now. I always think about how different I actually am versus who I thought I was at the time. And there's just, as the title of the article implies, crossing the gap. Like there is such a huge difference between who I know myself to be and who I thought I was back then. And what I often meditate on is just how convinced I was that I had to go to college, that I had to pursue a job in corporate America, and that this was the only way to have a high quality of life of any kind. And as a matter of fact, back then for me, and when I was in high school, this was in the late 90s, if you weren't going to college, it seemed like there was an assumption that you were kind of, you were a loser, you were failing. And there really was no other alternatives, weren't really presented at all when I was in high school. It was all about getting kids to college. And one of the things that I think, I'm just taking a look at my notes here. One of the things that I think about, there are a few things I think about. One of the first things I think about when I think about that time is when I was transitioning away from engineering, but I was still working as an engineer at the time. But when I was beginning to think through the transition, I spent so much time fielding criticism and fielding people's, I'm not going to say name calling, but there was a lot of, and I've talked about this before, there was a lot of, Travis, you're being ungrateful. Travis, you are wasting the talents that God has given you. Travis, don't you know how many people wish they had a good job like you? How could you ever think of walking away from such a thing? I had a good job in a corporate environment, so people felt like, Travis, you just need to suck it up and do this job. And I just didn't want to be there at all. And as I talked about before, was borderline suicidal when I was working there. Was sick of force feeding myself information that I didn't care about. And if I could rewind it, what I would do is, if I could rewind it, I would go all the way back to my senior year in high school. And if I could give some advice to myself, I would say, work as a personal trainer at the local YMCA. Maybe you have to keep living with your parents for a couple years. Find a boxing gym or martial arts gym to be a member of, and begin learning as much about anatomy, physiology, strength and conditioning as you possibly can, and then just build from there. And just take your time and build. And if you need to get a little part-time job as a security guard, go do that. And that's so different from go to college, major in engineering, get a job in corporate America. There's just such a huge gap between the two of those things. And one of the problems is I was so I was so caught up in people's criticism of me. One of the ways I think about it is it's almost like I was going through withdrawal from the approval of other people. Because at that point in my life, I'm in my early 20s, I don't know, 23, 24. And people always talked about me as I was the pinnacle of being responsible. Oh, he's so studious. He's such a good student and he works so hard in his studies, et cetera, et cetera. Even though I hated school. I hated school the entire time I was in it. I was never interested in anything that I was studying. But man, I was unaware of the fact that I really craved people's praise. And now part of that is because I used to be overweight as a kid. I got picked on a lot, teased a lot as a kid. And, we all want approval of some kind from the environment. But it was around this time when I really began to meditate on what it would mean to not need the approval of other people and just focus on what I need to do. And I mean, even today, that's a skill that I'm still building and practicing, and I have to practice it constantly, especially with trying to be a public figure on the internet. You're going to draw a lot of ire and just a lot of stupidity from people. And so you can't be obsessed with needing the approval of other people to go do what you want to do. And I couldn't even see the option. I mean, obviously, I went and served. For those of you that don't know, I went and served in the United States Army as a U.S. Army Special Forces soldier, as a Green Beret, after I left engineering. Now, when I was thinking about alternative routes, I mean, I could have gone police, I could have gone to the fire department, I could have just gone into emergency medicine and gotten my EMT and worked my way up to paramedic, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of different things that I could have done. And I'm glad that I chose the military, but I didn't even think of all these other alternative options because I was just so caught in this spiral of what I think I say it in my book, withdrawal from people's approval. Like people didn't see me as the responsible, conscientious person anymore because I wasn't doing what they thought I should be doing. And because I was so focused on that, I couldn't see all the alternative options around me, and neither could they, because everybody was so boxed into you gotta work a corporate job in order to have a good life. And it's just simply not true. It's just not a true statement. And which leads to a second point. So the first point of this article is, or this podcast is, you have to be careful getting locked into people's opinions. And I talk about this in the second principle. Go back to episode 3 of the podcast where I talk about understanding your story. There's a difference between constructive criticism and someone just spouting off their opinion. Constructive criticism for me at that time when I was leaving that when I was transitioning away from engineering or thinking about it, would have been, okay, Travis, I understand you're upset and you don't want to be an engineer anymore. Have you put together a financial plan to make your transition? I guess that's not even a criticism. That's just offering some insight. But the point is, people weren't having that conversation with me. People were giving their opinions of my decision. Travis, this is foolish. Travis, you're ungrateful. Travis, do you know how many people wish they had a good job like that? And I use those all the time because those are the literal things that people said to me. And they didn't use this word explicitly, but in so many words, people were also saying, Travis, you're lazy, which was mind-blowing to me because I'd worked so hard to lose all that weight and I'd worked so hard to get my engineering degree. How am I lazy? Like, clearly I'm somebody who's willing to work hard. I just got to the point where I was tired of working hard at stuff that I didn't give a damn about, right? I didn't care about engineering. So I had to move to something else. And so you have to be careful about allowing people's opinion to sort of dominate your headspace, because especially when you're trying to make a significant change in life and go in a different direction or move in a direction that nobody in your family's ever gone towards before, nobody, in your, let's say in your friend group, family, anybody close to you, nobody's moved in that kind of direction. But what was interesting, though, was I was the first person to finish college and get a corporate job in my family. I was also the first person to get myself in shape and begin educating myself about strength and conditioning, educating myself about money, et cetera, et cetera. Because remember, the theme of this whole thing is crossing the chasm between who we are and the environment that we're in and where we want to go when we're the only one, right? And so one of the big things I had to do, and I've talked about this before, is I had to have the respect and the objectivity in the moment back then to say to myself, Travis, you already got the engineering degree. You already lost 100 pounds. You've already done something incredibly difficult and unique. You don't have to give the opinion of people this much credence. And I suppose that that's what you got to do with that first point is you have to understand when people are calling you out because they know you. Like if somebody was calling me lazy and I was sitting on the couch every day playing video games and eating corn chips all day, then like yeah, maybe they're right. But like I had objectively done things that fly in the face of being lazy. Now you might say, Travis, I'm concerned. Like a lot of people really want that kind of job. Are you sure you want to walk away from that? Are you that unhappy? Like there's a difference in tone, and you have to. Over the years, ultimately, what I've learned is nobody owes it to me to understand what I see in my head, my vision. Okay, it's my vision. Remember, this is all about taking ownership. So it's my vision. So it's up to me to have the courage and the vigilance and the strategic effort to move forward in a logical, reasonable progression in the direction I want to go in when I don't have anybody around me that has set that example for me. I have to be willing to set that example. And this gets to the second part when we talk about strategy. Another big thing that I realized at this time in my life, kind of in the next few years, my first few years in the military, I started to read more. And part of the reason this was so important is I began to read first books to help me solve some particular problems I was having. So I didn't understand finances very well, personal finance very well, even though it's very simple. Like nobody had ever taught it to me explicitly. I mean, I'd heard people say, save your money, be frugal, but there were no specific mechanics. So like no one had ever showed me a dollar for dollar budget. Nobody had ever showed me how and why you invest in the stock market into an IRA or Roth IRA or what index funds were. Nobody had ever explained to me the power of compound interest and time. These are all very simple concepts and very powerful. But nobody had ever explained these things to me. And what is unfortunate, I'm not going to say unfortunate. What sometimes I look back on with a bit of frustration is I'm a slow reader. And because I was so adamant about doing well in school, because I wanted to get the good job, corporate America, college, yada, 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 I spent a lot of time reading the textbooks and the assigned reading that I got in school, which I was never interested in. So I sort of began to hate reading because I was always reading stuff I didn't care about. But in the military, I figured out that, like, look, man, when I went into the military, because I was in so much debt, I was $60,000 in debt when I went into the military. This was the fallout of leaving engineering. And for those of you who don't know, when I quit as an engineer, repossessed car, credit cards in default, plus student loans, $60,000. What am I going to do about it? And the feeling that I had, I never wanted to feel that way again. I never wanted to have the burden of owing people to be on my back ever again. And so I started to educate myself about money. And as I began to learn about budgeting and learn compound interest, IRAs, et cetera, all these things, I just remember being like, I can't believe that nobody ever told me these things. And then as I started to learn more about physiology and anatomy and over the years started solving problems in my own body in terms of chronic pain, et cetera, diet, nutrition, I just remember thinking like there was so much power in just setting aside $20 to buy a book or getting a library card and just going and putting my head in a book, particularly in these areas of interest that I already had so much knowledge. And I just think I, I, I don't want to mislead anybody. The fact that I went off to college and majored in electrical engineering and graduated with honors, the rigor and the diligence and the conscientiousness that I had to develop and express to do that, in part makes it to where I'm not intimidated to go learn really anything. Nothing is intimidating to learn. Like, I learned Korean when I was in the army. I don't know it. I can't speak it anymore, but I was reasonably conversational in Korean when I was in the military. I was a medic in the military. I mean, I delivered a baby while I was in the service. Like, I've learned some complex stuff, and a lot of my confidence in going into learning things and picking up a book or whatever, what have you, comes from knowing that if I can learn engineering, electrical engineering, and if I can do that well with something that I hated, like, surely I can learn how to solve these other problems in my life. And so I want to be honest in that regard. Like, college was extremely valuable in that regard for me. It's like once you've learned subject matter that difficult, everything else kind of pales in comparison. And so I'm not intimidated by anything. But even if I hadn't went to college, and this is part of what I try to express to people, like, we can learn, guys. If you don't have the money to go to college or the desire or interest to go to college, go get a book and get a tablet. Go look up podcasts on the topic. Go look up YouTube channels on the topic. Follow every social media influencer that's talking about the topic, and just try to absorb in as many ways as you possibly can. Like, there's so much knowledge out there. And yes, there's a lot of BS stuff out there. And so you're going to have to sift through things. But part of what you do, whether knowledge is good or not, in order for it to work for you, you have to go through a process of experimentation. I've learned so many things on strength and conditioning. Me and my wife were talking about this earlier today. I go through cycles of various exercise programs where I'll be on something for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and then I'll move to a different program. And the reason I do that is because I test things out diligently to see if they're reasonable for my life. I'll make adjustments as I implement things. And then as I recognize the need to solve a different kind of problem in my life physically, or a new priority or a new journey or a new exercise goal that I have, then I adjust the plan. But I don't leave behind all the stuff that I've learned in that process. And so we have to be careful about when we're reading things. Ultimately, the test of its usefulness is implementing those things in our own life and then observing the result. Am I moving closer to what I want to move towards? So for instance, I'll give you for instance. I use the budgeting software, You Need a Budget. It's ynab.com. I always recommend it to people. And they have a very easy to understand program where they teach you how to use the app. You can use it free for 34 days. And it gives you these overarching principles of budgeting. They've got 4 principles. And then it shows you kind of mechanically how to input the data into their app. And then with time, as I started using it and I started seeing it work, I was like, yeah, this is the app for me. But there are other budgeting softwares out there. There are other learning tools out there. There are other methodologies out there. There are people who use an envelope method, and they keep all their money in cash. And so that, whatever, if I've got $100 budgeted for restaurants, if I burn through that $100 in the first 2 weeks of the month, then that's it. The cash isn't physically in the envelope, so I can't use it. There's some people that use that method and they feel like it's a lot better for them than using some digital software or whatever. That's just one example. And so the point there is, what I got taught growing up is the only knowledge I'm not gonna say the only knowledge, it's the knowledge that is valuable and respected culturally is the knowledge that we get from school that is then certified by some sort of degree or certificate, i.e. go to college, get a degree. And while I see the value in that in terms of my confidence to go learn things, the most valuable knowledge that I've gained in my lifetime has come from doing my own research, using books, using podcasts, YouTube channels, et cetera, et cetera. And when, like, and when we're talking about when I was in the military, it was mainly just books because iPhones were just coming out back then. But just in the last 10 years, obviously our use of smartphones has exploded, and what we can gain access to, and we should all celebrate, because the trouble that is caused, I believe, for most people is not understanding personal finance, not understanding how to put together a workout, not understanding how to what to eat and how to cook. Like these very simple things that you don't need to go to college to learn, but it's kind of a roll of the dice whether anybody in your life teaches you how to do those things, because that's predicated on them knowing how to do it. My parents didn't know how to work out or what a good diet was supposed to be. They just ate what their parents taught them to eat and what their environment and what their culture had shown them to eat. And the way I got out of that behavior is by educating myself. And you don't have to go to a college to educate yourself. Educating yourself is taking in knowledge and then applying it strategically in your life, and then observing the result and asking yourself, is this the result I want? And did I acquire it in a sustainable fashion? Do I need to update? Do I need to make some changes? Do I need to go get a whole different knowledge source because this isn't working? And that's all I've done. And any one of us can go through that process today. And so that's the second thing. We gotta not undermine the value of just in our own life with the resources that we have, educating ourselves. I'm a big advocate. Like, look, man, if you got to go into debt for it, you don't need it. And to some extent, I feel that way about houses. But I'm not an island. Like I'm married. I have family. I have friends. And so maybe I do have to go get a mortgage one day. But everything else, like, I'm a huge advocate. If you got to go into debt for it, you don't need it. So you can buy a book for $20, but you're taking a risk if you spend $40,000 on education and it doesn't pan out the way you want it to. I mean, that's a huge risk. So, and I suppose the third thing to think about, and that kind of segues into this third point, is you got to be willing to be a trailblazer. And this was the big thing for me is, I was in a situation growing up where I wanted to be athletic. I wanted to participate in sports, but I was quote unquote trapped in this 300-pound body with chronic knee pain, chronic back issues, very inflexible, always anxious, always on edge, lacking in self-confidence. But I just had this vision of who I wanted to be. And I had this passion and interest in fitness and how do I make myself better? How do I improve my diet? How do I improve my self-confidence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there was just nobody who I could reference to tell me how to solve that problem. Love my parents, but love my family. But all of them were or are overweight. And I would have to think hard about someone else in my family who has gotten themselves in shape and stayed that way. I can't think of anybody else, any adult, anybody, around my age or older. And so for me, growing up in the early 90s, it was like I was going to have to be the first. And what I want to say here is, and I say this in the article, it takes a lot of courage and a lot of vigilance to be the only one and to be the one that goes against the grain. And look, y'all, this is, again, a big reason why I'm such an advocate for a personal fitness practice, a personal movement practice, exercise, nutrition. A big reason I'm such an advocate for these things is they're easily accessible ways to begin developing self-confidence. And when you say, like, I don't know, let's just say you've been sedentary for the last 10 years. When you make the decision of, okay, like, it's the new year, I'm going to start walking every day. And you start out, I'm going to start out with a 5-minute walk every morning, every day. Do that for a month. You hit that target. If we just stop right there, you have accumulated 30 days of 5 minutes of walking when you were doing nothing before. The next month, you're like, I'm going to up it to 10. Before you know it, you're walking, for a total of 2 hours a day, and you've broken it up throughout the day. And now you're starting to do stretching, and your whole physiology and mentality has changed from just a simple shift in behavior and seeing yourself be empowered to win, to set a goal and win. And I think a big reason, a huge part of the reason why I was able to pay off debt, why I was able to go to college and be successful as a first generation college student, why I was able to lose 100 pounds, why I was able to join the military. Like, these were all first in my family. Losing weight, going off to college and getting my degree, like joining the military, especially joining the military and becoming a U.S. Army Green Beret, like these were all like way out of the box first in my family. And, the conversations I would have with my parents, with my sister at the time when she was alive, with friends, was like, man, you're crazy, you're out of your mind. And remember, y'all, this is about ownership. Nobody owes you confidence in your vision. Like, stop looking for that. Stop looking for people to believe in what you want to do. But here's the deal. Just because when you're the only one, it's like your dreams can haunt you. So you might as well go see if you can do it. Because your dreams can haunt you. And this is not some like, oh, dream it and achieve it, some like flowery vision board stuff. Not that I'm against any of that, but like, remember, y'all, I'm very practical. You still got to be responsible. Yeah, chase your dream, but you still got to pay bills. You still need to be saving for retirement. You still need to stay out of debt. You still need to be faithful to your significant other. This is not about being stupid, but it's about being strategic and having the guts and the gall to go do what you want to do and take responsibility for the risk associated with that path. Okay, be willing to be a trailblazer, or just admit to yourself that you're scared and go be a part of the group. And I'm not saying that you were wrong for doing that. Okay. But you at least have to allow other people who have the courage to try. You got to get out of the way. Hopefully you choose to get out of the way. And if you want to offer any advice, offer the advice that they need to be responsible along the way. Because if they're trying something that is super, super hard, like, I don't know, they want to be a professional basketball player and they're only 5'8", right? Like, that's going to be a tough road. I can't say it's impossible because I can't predict the future. But along with that, you can say like, okay, well, where's your nutrition? Where's your strength and conditioning? How are you handling your money? Because that journey is going to be fueled by all those things. And whatever alternative this person may choose to do as a result of failing at that dream and having to eventually give it up, that alternative is also going to be fueled by those things. Remember, I always talk about 4 fundamental areas of life: health, personal finances, relationships, and work, y'all. In the article, I say, if you want to make a change and there is a vast difference between the average people in your environment and the person that you want to be, then that means you have a huge gap that you're trying to cross. And it's going to take courage. It's going to take vigilance to stay on the path. Because I can tell you, it's going to be scary sometimes. And sometimes that fear is just going to be what people project at you as you try to go do something different. And to a large extent, you got to forgive people for being scared. Because a lot of times I don't think it's people hating on you. I think it's people truly afraid that you're destroying your life. And that's what it was for me when I was quitting engineering. I really do think Like my parents didn't hate me. They wanted the best for me, and in their minds, I had already achieved the best by getting a job in corporate America, having a salary that I had, et cetera, et cetera. But I just knew that I wanted different. That's not what I wanted. So it's on me to go out and be who I want to be. So think about that, y'all. Look, follow the podcast if you're listening on Spotify. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel at Travis Daigle. I also have an Instagram, also at Travis Daigle. So follow me on those platforms and make sure you go to the website, y'all, and you can find all the links there. You can also find a link to my book, Adapt and Overcome: 3 Principles to Master the Most Important Skill in Life, which is what, y'all? Personal ownership. Make sure to subscribe to the blog at the website as well. You'll get my articles to your inbox a couple of times a month. And look, man, as always, y'all, like, I believe in you, and that's why I do this, because I think we're leaving a lot of potential on the table, and we're also blaming each other a lot. And we got to take ownership for ourselves and for the life that we want. And we have to, maybe most importantly, we have to take ownership of our headspace. This is something I'm reminding myself of all the time. And, when we want to do something unique, we got to decide that it's on our shoulders and that we're willing to take the risk involved and that we're willing to put forth the effort to strategize appropriately. I'll talk to y'all next time.